Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. This is Season 15, Episode 12. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm speaking with Stephen Shapin, who is a renowned historian of science, currently a professor at Harvard University. His groundbreaking work explores the intersection of science, society, and culture. His books, including Leviathan and the Air Pump and The Scientific Life, have reshaped our understanding of scientific inquiry and its social context. His new book is Eating and Being, a history of ideas about our food and ourselves, University of Chicago Press. I take you now to my conversation with Stephen Shapin. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking with Stephen Shapin, whose book Eating and Being, a history of ideas about food and ourselves is out. Stephen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about Eating and Being and how you came to write it?
Well, it's a book that's been a long time in the making. I can think of two reasons why I wrote it. The first is I am an academic historian. Sorry about that, but I am. And the second is I like food. I don't like the term foodie, but I enjoy my food and my wine, and I've been writing about it for some time. I travel. I've been blessed to have eaten in some very good restaurants, and I wanted to take these two aspects of my life and put them together. Uh, it wasn't the desire to have fun, but to take things that I was interested in, that I cared about. One is the writing of history, and I'll say what kind of history in a bit. And the other is food. I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could put these bits of my life together? And I did. And I was very happy to have done it. It kept me motivated. But the kind of historian that I am is relevant. I'm an historian of science, or of science and medicine. That means that I have for a long time been interested in things which are considered to be objective or hard, physics and chemistry, things that are, about the world, not about ourselves, and things which are, in, sciences tend to be regarded as a thing apart, not part of the fabric of our lives. And I wondered, as an historian of science, whether it would be interesting to look at things that were soft, often regarded as subjective, things like taste, things which were very much part of our lives, indeed of our emotional, moral lives. So it's a way, it's like flipping things completely upside down from the world of objectivity and the hard to the world of subjectivity and the soft. And I found that I actually thought I had some interesting things to say about those sciences that are integrated into the fabric of our lives, the way that food is integrated into the fabric of our lives. And the other thing is, because I'm an historian, I wanted to know, how did we get where we are? Have we always been this way? And I knew enough from the history of science to know that the history of ideas about food and our bodies were very different in the past than the way they are now. And so that gave me a narrative. How did we get from there to here? I didn't want to write this as a history of scientific progress or triumph. I just simply had the question, how did we actually get here? And I wanted to document this other way of thinking about food and ourselves. And I suppose we can take this up in a bit, but there's this expression that actually originates in the 19th century, and that is, you are what you eat. Uh, and I thought uh, that the way we think about an expression like you are what you eat now is very different from the way people thought about themselves and their food in the past. So I use that as a kind of, how to put it, a framework for telling the story, going from the past. In fact, really the deep past of antiquity in the 17th century to the present. What changed? How did it change? What does it mean for ourselves?
And just to give the readers or the listeners, sorry, context, you've written you're known quite a bit. In fact, I would say you're very well known for writing about science, medicine, technology, philosophy, and more. Um, so you were very established. So Would you say this book is a departure for you?
Um, I just told a story about why it's not. In other words, why it's a understandable or even logical thing for someone like me to do.
Yeah.
It is a departure, I think, in several senses. Uh, Historians of science have traditionally taken their status from the prestige of the things that they study. That's why we have, at least in the past, been accused of physics envy. And it's one of the characteristics you may recognize this, your listeners may recognize this when one talks about food. It comes together with some sort of justification. Why are we writing? What's serious to be said about something as hmm, basic as food? Isn't that the ultimate soft stuff?
Hmm.
And so in that sense, is a departure, and it's part of my interest in the so-called soft sciences being much more part of the fabric of our lives than the so-called hard science. So it's a departure in that sense. I don't think that many people have taken the path from writing about the scientific revolution and Isaac Newton and Robert Boyle to writing about the foodways of
Yeah.
the present. But this is for me. I thought this was a justifiable thing to do, and that one could be interested in change. And one other thing I'll say that you may not interest your readers a lot, but in the past, people like historians of science would write mainly about the triumph of present day science over the past. A triumphalist, or sometimes called a presentist uh, history. But what we have largely done as academic historians is write about particular episodes, like little vignettes or little gems. And practically nobody writes about how we got from the past to the present in any other way. So
Yeah.
we've rejected the kind of triumph of science over superstition, but very few people write about how we got from the past to the present in any significant way. And I've never done that. So in that sense, it's a departure. I can't think of anybody in my line of work who has written it, I'll call it a serious book about how we got to where we are. And I wanted to do that.
You talked about the ancient and medieval understanding of dietetics intertwined with morality and virtue in eating and being. Can you elaborate on the concept of moderation as a virtue and its connection to health?
Yes, but let me first say something about dietetics because it's not a jargon term that I've made up.
Yeah.
It is a proper term for a branch of medicine established since antiquity by figures such as Hippocrates and Galen. Uh, it was arguably the most important branch of medicine. It was preventative medicine. In other words, how to live your life so as to stay healthy, not to cure you when you were ill. Now, diet comes from the Greek word dieta, which simply means order. And dietetics included things like what you should eat and drink, but it also includes many, many aspects of your life. So, for example, how and how long you should sleep, uh, what forms of exercise you should take, where you should situate your house, how you should manage what were called delicately your evacuations, including uh, feces, urine, and sexual release, and significantly how you should manage your emotions. So dietetics as a branch of medicine takes in so much of the fabric of your life that the relationship between that and the moral order is really rather obvious. Anyone who's giving you advice on how you should live your life is talking the language of morality. And as you said, the overwhelming answer that connected medicine to morality was you should live your life in moderation, avoiding extremes. This is carved from the Apollo's temple at Delphi. Nothing too much, nothing in excess. So with food and drink, between abstinence and gluttony, don't sleep too much, don't sleep too little. Don't have too much sex, don't have no sex at all, and so on. And so moderation was a temperance, same word as moderation, is not only a way to health, but it is a virtue in itself. Living the moderate life is a virtuous life for much of ancient Greek and Roman thought, and indeed for much of Christian thought. So that interested me too, because here's a body of medical and scientific thought telling people how they should eat and other things. And it's not like modern medicine, which is about just how to be healthy and live long. It's about how to be a good person. And that fascinated me.
You talked in your book about how the ancient and medieval understanding of dietetics intertwined with morality and virtue. Can you elaborate a little bit on the concept of moderation as a virtue and its connection to health?
Well, moderation, as I said, is a virtue. If you have the figure of the seven virtues, temperance or moderation is one of them. Uh, it represents if you eat in moderation, if you eat neither too much nor too little, if you take exercise in moderation, neither too much nor too little, and so on, you have your best chance of remaining healthy and living a long time. But a person who did that was a person who displayed self-control and good judgment, and therefore could constituted a moral pattern of life. So the golden mean or moderation is a way to health, but it's also constitute itself a virtue. You could recognize people who lived in that way as virtuous people.
Can we talk a little bit about the key factors that led to the transition from dietetics to nutritional science in the 19th century? And how did this shift impact our understanding of food and its role in health? I know that when I read about this time period, I've read some cookbooks from this time period, and there seems to be a kind of a moral shift to health. I remember reading about like Post and the people that invented cereal and all that, and kind of having these places where people would go to learn about health and well-being. Is that kind of all tied together?
Well, the first question is why things changed. The language of dietetics, the language of moderation, the language of qualities. The world was made up of earth, air, water, and fire that had the qualities of warm, cold, moist, and dry. This was the scientific language of dietetics. It also became from writers like Aristotle and Plato. So, to your question about what changed, I would say the medicine that talked about what our food was and how we should eat always had a relationship with science, but the science changed. So for the Aristotelian science, what took its place by the 18th and 19th century was the language of chemistry and the language of physics to understand the body, the food as a set of chemical constituents that were taken into the body. The body ultimately is a heat engine coming from thermodynamics in physics. So the question that occupied the nutrition science that emerged from the first decades of the 19th century to the end of the 19th century was how are the constituents in food now conceived to be carbohydrates, protein, and fats and minerals. How do these make the human body? How do the constituents, these foods, make the human body? And how do they power the human body? Emerging in the category of the calorie by the 1880s and the 1890s. So the short answer to your question is medicine has always been founded in science. The science changed. And the sciences that as it were, provided the framework for nutrition science were the sciences of chemistry and of physics, especially of thermodynamics.
In Eating and Being, you talk about a loss of certain sensibilities associated with dietetics. Can you elaborate on what these sensibilities were and how they might have contributed to the more holistic approach of food and well-being?
Yes, one of the things that might surprise readers, again, a framework in which you can hang this. There's a Latin phrase, quod sapit nutrit, basically means if it tastes good, it's good for you. What's the scheme of things in which people could say that? Because I think we rather feel these days, especially in the world of flavor chemistry, if it tastes good, it's likely to be bad for us. So what was the scheme of things in which taste was considered a reliable gauge to what things were and whether they were likely to be good for you? So one way in which you could understand that is that um, your body, the humors in your body leading to your temperament of your body tended towards heat and moisture. If you were sanguinary and blood dominating, if you were phlegmatic, uh, cold and moist, phlegm dominating. And the things that they said agreed with you are those foods whose qualities match the qualities of your body. So if you were a phlegmatic person, cold and moist dominating in your body, the things that agreed with you might be things like ripe peaches and melons. If, however, you were sanguinary, warm and moist, blood dominating, the foods that agreed with you were likely to be things like red meat. And your taste, your tongue, told you that. In other words, the tongue was part of your body. So if things were sat well with you, agreed with you, tasted good on your tongue, they gave a sign that their qualities match your qualities. They were right for you. So you have a scheme of things in terms of which your taste is actually a robustly reliable guide to what things are like, what foods are like, and whether they're likely to be good for you or bad for you. Of course, what changed is we don't think of our taste as a reliable guide to what things are, uh, because our food is not made up of qualities, it's made up of constituent nutrients. Proteins and carbohydrates and sodium, potassium don't taste of anything. We don't have the taste of protein. We don't have the taste of carbohydrates. So the taste as it were, been left as a kind of orphan in our cultural scheme of things. That means it's been taken over by connoisseurs. It's not about what things are literally like. It's about what we like.
Yeah.
And that also fascinated me because that deals with the question of the nature of the objective and the subjective and how they change. So I'm writing a good part of the book when I'm writing about traditional dietetics about a world in which taste tells you something about what foods are like, and now they don't.
How has our evolved understanding of food influenced our self-perception and identity? Can you explore the ways in which food has been used to construct cultural and social identities?
Well, there are a variety of ways of doing that. Certainly, constructs personal identities. Your management of food, like your management of sleeping and exercise, things like that, constitutes your identity. So, if you were, for example, a glutton, you would be committing the sin of gluttony, but you would make a display of yourself as a person who lacked self-control. So, the management of these aspects of traditional dietetics makes you as a certain kind of person lacking in self-control or managing your body with prudence. But there's more to it than that. Um, in addition to the scheme of things in which you're taking in the qualities, hot, cold, moist, and dry of foods, there's a form of what I call analogical reasoning that's at play in past thinking about food. And there's a chunk of one of my chapters that deals with why the English eat roast beef and are called beef eaters. And it captures some of that. Um, Beef is, especially rare roast beef, is something which has an analogical relationship to a manly or chivalric kind of character. You get the play. Shakespeare does a lot in describing who people are in terms of what they eat. You find this in Henry V, when the English troops at Agincourt uh, have a long march and they're tired and the French send out a spy to see how the English are doing. and comes back and he reports to the French generals. Uh, the English are said to be very valiant, eating great diets of red roast beef, but they're all out of it now, so we'll surely win the battle. So the relationship between national or collective character can be informed with this kind of analogical reasoning. The Brits, through the period of Gilray and the cartoons of the late 18th and early 19th century, like to contrast the stout English beef eaters with the weedy French eating pathetic meals of garlic and dried onions, uh, as a way of saying we are the kind of people who are, in terms of what we take in terms of our national preferences, in terms of what we have in our land, brave, bold, bloody minded. So that's one example of how a collective identity can be constituted and advertised through what people eat.
In the past, food choices were often seen as moral choices. How has this perspective changed, or has it? And what is the implications for contemporary food culture?
Well, the kind of scheme that I was talking about with traditional dietetics is more or less gone. You don't go to your doctor to be told how to be a virtuous person, especially with Ozempic. You can take a pill to control obesity. So the moral
Yeah.
aspect of medicine seems, and there's certain qualification, it's largely dropped out. So the intimate connection between medicine and morality that I described in traditional dietetics is not a feature of the way we live now. But has eating and eating and morality gone their separate ways? And here you have to say they haven't. There's still an important and intimate connection between eating and morality. I'll give you some examples. Vegetarianism.
Yeah.
Now, vegetarianism at present has many justifications and many sensibilities. One is care for animal suffering. The other is care for the planet, that we're going to have to eat a lot less meat to ensure planetary health. Uh, these things are moral. These are moral considerations, but the moral actors are the planet and a moral sensibility to animals. Now, in the past, there were vegetarians, although it was considered to be a rather risky course of action to take. But the overwhelming justification was not care for the suffering of animals, but if you ate meat, and especially red meat, you would become like the beasts, which you did not want to do. So this is a form of analogical reasoning. The when the Brahmins were discovered in India, who a Pacific people, a peace loving people, uh, this was associated with a rather extraordinary vegetarianism, which people, for example, in England and France, found it very, very difficult to understand how you could be a vegetarian. Uh, but when vegetarianism, so named, became noteworthy in the 18th and 19th century, it became closely associated with the idea of pacifism and with the idea of caring for the feelings of animals. So the what I'm trying to say is the modes of moral thinking about food have changed, but they have not gone away.
In the last century, we had a rise in industrialization of food processing and the rise of processed foods. And how have they influenced our relationship with food and health?
Well, branded food is actually a rather recent development, and the ability to produce foods whose constituents and whose flavor profile is as it were manufactured is a rather new feature of our world. We date it from around the middle of the 19th century. Uh, Government becomes an actor in this when government mandates that we are told about the constituents in our food, as in the nutrition facts label. So we've become used to monitoring the constituents in our food, and we've come used to thinking about whether foods are good for us or not in terms of these constituents. Uh, Amongst the most influential food writers and food commentators of the present, you have people like Michael Pollan, who criticizes the notion of what he calls nutritionism, and that as thinking of your food as a set of constituents instead of thinking about food holistically. Um, and he thinks that this way of thinking, which is both associated with the rise of nutrition science and with the rise of manufactured and branded food, is bad for us. And he's convinced a lot of people of this. In Italy, the slow food movement similarly urges us not to think about the constituents of our food, but to restore to commonsensical ways of thinking about our food, holistically thinking about food as part of the fabric of our everyday life, of conviviality, of taking food in moderation and drink with others. And so you have both the rise of manufactured food, of the role of the state in advising us what to eat, and more recently a kind of pushback to this way of thinking about food, probably as strong in the Bay Area where you are as it is anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What are some of the potential consequences of our current food system, and what steps can be taken to promote healthier and more sustainable eating habits, in your thoughts?
Well, again, this is my book is not a set of recommendations on what to do, but the end of the book does deal with people, influential voices in our society who are telling us what we ought to do. So the environmental movement, as we all know, urges us to eat more sustainably, more seasonally, more locally.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Planetary health, the climate crisis, and we're all very familiar with these kinds of urgings. So we want to eat in such a way that we contribute less to carbon emissions and to carbon miles, food miles. Uh, and again, the slow food movement in Italy is similarly concerned with unrolling some of the ways in which our food supply has become globalized and modernized. Slow food originally took its name by its opposition to fast food, viz., McDonald's.
Yeah.
But it's not about taking a long time in the preparation of food. It's about fast in the sense of globalization.
Right.
How do we preserve the indigenous foods that are in danger of being swept away by McDonald's and other globalized fast food companies? So the recommendation is basically to unwind aspects of the modernization of the food supply. And I have to say, although McDonald's is in no danger of going bankrupt at any time soon, slow food can be described, I think, as one of the most successful social movements of modern times.
I like that. Can you share some of the challenges and rewards of researching such a vast and complex topic that you've worked on with eating and being? And has it given you any food for thought, pun unintended?
Well, it's an expression of a lot of thought that I've put into food over a number of years. I'm afraid one of the dangers of working on this and thinking about this is I have tended to think too much about food, and especially B, I've tended to talk too much about it and bore people who share a table with me sometimes. So it's difficult to find people who care to think about and talk about food as much as I do, and I've learned to shut up judiciously.
You and I are very similar in that. I think I'm on the same page there. I think you and I could probably talk and we wouldn't have a problem. Well,
Probably.
now that the book is done, what's next for you?
I don't know. I'm not the youngest guy, so I don't know that there's another research monograph in me. Uh, I I might write more about this. the question that Michael Pollan got, and I'm not Michael Pollan by any stretch of the imagination,
Oh, yeah.
but the book starts with a meal that I prepare for my wife and myself. And a number of people, interesting, says, so what about a Stephen Shapin cookbook?
That's a good idea.
That would be a joke, but a joke that I might be willing to entertain.
Why not? That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Stephen, I really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you, and I really enjoyed your book. I want to let listeners know that we have links to that in the bio. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
That's all the time we have left for today on the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I want to thank my guest, Professor Stephen Shapin, for talking with me about his new book, Eating and Being, out now. You can purchase it through the link in the bio or at all better bookstores. We will have more episodes next week. Until then, I'll see you at the library.